Welcome on in. WIP Daily, Joe Giglio with you. Appreciate everyone listening, subscribing, following, and of course, watching on our YouTube page, 94 WIP, the YouTube page. Tucker Bagley will join me as he always does on our video podcast in a few minutes to give his take on what the Phillies did and really didn't do at the MLB trade deadline. Now, it's kind of weird. The backdrop of the conversation with the Phillies is a dramatic comeback victory over the Marlins, who did more than the Phillies at the deadline in Miami last night. Really good Phillies win. But this conversation right now is more big picture on the Phillies, what they didn't do, what they did do. And I wanted to go over some winners and losers that kind of jumped out to me from the Phillies trade deadline activities, or inactivity, depending on how you want to frame it. So we know they made two deals. Michael Lorenzen in for Lee, the young infielder that was in single A with Lakewood. Lorenzen's fine. I think he will help. They'll go to a six-man rotation for the rest of for the rest of August and see how things work out. Try to keep people healthy. Lorenzen has the ability to go back to the bullpen once they get to October, if that's what they want to do, if they get to October. So I'm fine with Michael Lorenzen. I don't think it's a bad pickup. I never looked at Lee as a prospect and thought, oh, wow, he's going to turn into something special that they'll really, really miss. So I think that's a fine deal for a rental. Rodolfo Castro it reminds me of the Edmundo Sosa deal from last year, where it's like he's kind of an interesting player and maybe there's some upside there. And they talk about him maybe as a future starter. I don't believe that. I didn't really believe it with Sosa. They traded for him, and then 4 months later, they signed a shortstop for $300 million. Dave Dombrowski to say the same thing yesterday. Castro could be a starter for them one day. Where? They have Bryce Stott at second base entrenched. They have Trey Turner on an 11-year contract. They have Alec Bohm at third base. Unless they really think Castro could become a third baseman, Alec Bohm is a future first base. It's kind of a bizarre thing, but okay. Utility guy. Better than Josh Harrison, hits lefties, can't hit righties, but hit lefties. So that was the Phillies deal, trade deadline deals. And my first instinct is it wasn't enough. They didn't do enough to help an offense that came into play last night, 21st in home runs. And you look at the list of teams below the Phillies in home runs, and I think there's a real chance none of them make the playoffs. The Brewers are a couple behind the Phillies. They did add some thump at the deadline. We'll see who hits more runs over the course of the season, but maybe one. I would say maybe one team that is below the Phillies will make the playoffs. Milwaukee certainly has a good chance, and they have some excellent pitching and some defense there. So I worry about the Phillies offense here, but let's dive into the winners and losers. We'll get Tucker's take at the end on what jumped out to him. I'll kind of go back and forth, winner or loser, winner or loser. My first winner for the Phillies at the deadline is Michael Lorenzen. He has a Zach Eflin kind of feel to him, to where I could see him performing well in whatever role they put him in. And he could springboard success he has with the Phillies. He's a free agent to be into free agent, just like Eflin did last year. Lorenzen's had a weird career. I see some similarities to Eflin. I think Eflin's a better pitcher, but some similarities to where it's like, what is their role? What is their upside? How good are they? But if he comes to a team and he has Caleb Cotham here, who used to be his pitching coach, with the Cincinnati Reds. He has a lot of former teammates he's known over the years. Nick Castellanos with the Reds, Trey Turner on one of the Team USA's, Bryce Harper as well. He knows some of these guys. So it's a comfortable environment, knows people, knows the pitching coach, pennant race, not in Detroit where no one's watching. I think Lorenzen is a winner. He gets to a contender, and he gets to pitch on a big stage. And if the Phillies get to October, he's going to be in high leverage moments, whether it is starting a game as a starting pitcher, or, sixth inning, seventh inning, they need it out. They may go to Michael Lorenzen. So he feels like a winner to me. A loser in this is Dave Dombrowski. And Dombrowski could spin it any way he wants, and he could put it back on the players that he originally brought in here, like Castellanos with the big home run last night, or Trey Turner, who they keep waiting for him to emerge and be the guy that he could be. That's fine. But Dave Dombrowski weeks ago telegraphed to everyone listening that he wanted a bat for the outfield, specifically a right-handed hitting outfield bat. He telegraphed it. He telegraphed his need, his want. To the point where they were adamant and so obvious that Bryce Harper was going to play first base before the deadline, to show them he could play first base before the deadline, so he could get a slugger in the outfield and get Kyle Schwarber out of the outfield. Well, when everyone knows exactly what you are looking for and asking for, I'm sure the prices were high. So I understand the balance between not doubling down on mistakes and not wanting to go overpay for Teoscar Hernandez or overpay for Adam Duvall, neither of which that moved yesterday. And their teams are obviously kind of still in the race with the Red Sox and the Mariners. But when you tell everyone, this is what I need and this is what I want, you can't 2 weeks later say, wow, the prices were high for that thing that how did everyone know I wanted that? Like, he was so obvious about it. I don't think he added enough. And it reminds me of last year's deadline to an extent where this may work. The Phillies may make the playoffs. It's certainly a very mediocre playoff field. But I don't think they did enough to win the World Series yesterday. It reminded me of last year when I won a Carlos Rodon. They didn't get him. And I thought they didn't have quite enough pitching to win the World Series. So we'll see. But I thought Dombrowski was a loser yesterday, all things considered. Another winner in this for me is the current left fielders. Johan Rojas specifically, but we could include Jake Cave. They get to continue to play. The Phillies did not improve their outfield. They didn't get an outfielder. Unless Bryce Harper could get back to the outfield before the end of the year, I mean, they have to play these guys. They've already made it so clear they don't want Schwarber to play left field. They want to get him off his feet. They want him to be a DH. Well, with that being said, okay, that means Johan Rojas, who Dave Dombrowski singled out yesterday, he's got to keep playing. So he's a winner. I mean, I'll include Cave in this because he plays sometimes, but really Johan Rojas became a winner as he's now been thrust into a pennant race here for the Phillies and gets to keep playing. So Rojas, a winner for me. A loser of yesterday, and it kind of goes with the theme of the season, was Trey Turner, because I thought, and I've compared this Trey Turner thing a lot to Jason Hayward with the 2016 Chicago Cubs. I thought that Trey Turner, if the Phillies got a bat yesterday, let's just use Teoscar Hernandez, for example, just to use that name. If they got a Teoscar Hernandez and he got hot for 2 months and the Phillies started winning games, and let's say Bryce Harper's power came back a little bit and Castellanos bounces back a little bit, even if it wasn't as good as it was in the first half, just production. And Schwarber's batting average goes above 200. Like, those things happen, right? If all that happened, I actually thought Trey Turner could fall under the radar a little bit. I thought he could, even if his season never bounced back, he could go to a point where we forget him. We don't talk about it as much because it's not as important. He's hitting 7th. The Phillies are winning. They're going to the playoffs. Jason Hayward was a story in 2016 with the Cubs, but they won the World Series. That was the story. They were winning. Anthony Rizzo was the story. Schwarber's comeback was the story. Chris Bryant was the story. Arrieta was the story. Joe Madden. It wasn't so much every day nationally and locally, I'm sure in Chicago, that Trey Turner couldn't, and Jason Hayward couldn't hit. And I think with Trey Turner, we're trending to that still being the thing. They could have moved him down the pecking order. So yeah, I thought yesterday he became a loser here in all this. Another winner for the Phillies, Aaron Nola. I thought Aaron Nola yesterday with the news of Lorenzen and a 6-man rotation really won, because we know Aaron Nola always pitches better with a 6-man rotation, extra rest. And for Nola, it's a double whammy. He could pitch better, help the Phillies, but also if he's more rested down the stretch of the season, it helps him pitch better leading into his free agency. The Phillies may have made Aaron Nola more money this offseason. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if he gets a full month and a half in a 6-man rotation if Nola pitches his best now. If he has a little bit of an uptick compared to where he's been all year, and he ends stronger than he started, and it's like, you know what? People look at his track record. You talk about his track record more than, well, it was kind of weird for the first 4 months of the season, a lot of home runs, and he goes into free agency, and the offers are still what we thought they'd be before the season, which is, who knows, upwards of $150 million. So I thought Nola was a winner here because the more rest he gets, the better he usually is pitching. So I'll include Nola in my list of winners. Another winner, actually, that I'll put in here. I'll kind of do this as a winner-loser. I thought a loser would be the current edition of this Phillies winning the World Series. I didn't think they moved the needle on their World Series hopes. But the other side of that is, by keeping Mick Abel, by keeping Griff McGarry, by keeping Justin Crawford, they likely increased their chances in 2025, 2026 to be a better baseball team. Whatever that team looks like, they could use those guys as trade chips next year, off-season, if there are bigger fish out there that obviously really weren't out there this year. I mean, Bellinger didn't get moved. Soto didn't get moved. It was a dull trade deadline for a lot of reasons. I mean, teams just didn't want to sell. I mean, even the White Sox, who had a fire sale, didn't trade Dylan Cease. The Mets traded their 2 starters. That was the big story over the last couple of days. But there really weren't young star-level players getting traded. So if the Phillies still want to go down that path, they can at some point with Painter and Abel and Crawford. But it hurts them now, helps them in the future. And I'll throw one more winner in there, and then we'll get to Tucker and his thoughts on all this. One more winner, potential winner, is Rhys Hoskins. Because there is that hope, and it's faint, but it's out there, that Rhys could come back, rejoin this team, be a part of this down the stretch of the season. I don't know what that means. Is that late September? Is that early October? Is it have to be late October? It's just like Schwarber at 16. It's touch and go. It's probably going to be a right down to the deadline thing. Can he come back? But I thought for the short term, the Phillies obviously left open a need for a bat in their lineup. And also for the long term, we mentioned this on WIP Daily and all the WIP shows yesterday, all day at McGurk's on our trade deadline special. If the Phillies had acquired an outfielder with team control, think Lane Thomas from the Nationals, Rhys's time in Philadelphia effectively would have been over. They would have had under club control Bryce Harper, Nick Castellanos, Kyle Schwarber, the outfielder we're talking about, Dylan Carlson, Lane Thomas, whoever. So there would have been no spot. Bryce would have had to be a long-term first baseman, and we could have written off Rhys ever coming back to the Phillies. So that door is still open for this year, for the future. So Nola, Lorenzen, Rojas, I guess Jay Cave too, Hoskins, all winners, the future Phillies winners. But the losers are Dave Dombrowski, Trey Turner, because the pressure is still squarely on him and there's no one to cover for him. And I think the 2023 Phillies' chances of actually winning the World Series, all the losers yesterday. Tucker, what did you make of the deadline here with the Phillies, Dombrowski and Rodolfo Castro and Michael Lorenzen?
I was certainly underwhelmed by the deadline because, we were all at McGurk's. Everyone was excited. We had Jack and James at the breaking news desk, and news never really broke. It kind of just came out. And Lorenzen's, I think, is a nice piece. Castro, I'm out on ever since that whole phone incident a couple years ago where it fell out of his pocket as he was sliding into third. Like, that just doesn't play well, especially in the city. So I'm immediately out on him, and adding the fact he's got an OPS in the 400s against righties makes me think he might not be that playable on this team. But it's kind of funny when you pose the idea to me of winners and losers. The two names I wrote down were Aaron Nola and Rhys Hoskins, and you classify Nola as a winner. I kind of look at it the other way. I think he's going to pitch well over the final 2 months. Like, we've talked about it for years now, just how much better he is when he has an extra day of rest. I wonder if the Phillies view Michael Lorenzen as more than just a short-term rental. Like, he's only 31 years old. He has a track record of pitching pretty well. They already have a pretty deep rotation moving forward, signed beyond just this season. Like, Zach Wheeler's going to be a free agent after 2024, you hope. Andrew Painter comes up. Mick Abel and Griff McGarry continue to pitch well in the minors. Ranger Suarez probably figures out. Taijuan Walker still has 3 years on his deal after this. The Phillies made it kind of obvious to Aaron Nola that they don't expect to give him a huge money deal. They broke off negotiations in spring training. I wonder if they view Michael Lorenzen as someone who can just take that spot, who I don't think he's a number 2, but maybe he's a number 4 in this rotation. And you kind of move Suarez and Walker and possibly Abel, Painter, whoever it is above him in that lineup. I think it almost, I don't know if it, shuts the door on Aaron Nola being a Philly past 2023, but there's another guy in the building who can do his job, right? Like, there's another guy there who can take down innings and be a starting pitcher. So that was my first thought. And my second thought was Rhys Hoskins and his long-term future with the Phillies. Maybe not long-term, but I felt like when he got hurt in spring training, it almost felt like he was inevitably going to come back on a 1-year deal next year. He loves it here. He's been around the team. He's been traveling with the team for like the last month or so on all their road trips. He's been in the dugout for most of the season. Seems to be a pretty popular guy. I don't know if he's going to come back. Like, he's in the elite athlete that Kyle Schwarber was back in 2016. And I say that with my tongue firmly implanted in my cheek. But you kind of look at where this is going. They don't have an answer at first base right now, unless you really want to move Alec Boehm there and, try and figure out third base another way. I think this is all kind of coming down to Rhys Hoskins coming back at least on a 1-year, $9 million contract next year to just kind of prove himself and re-up his value before he hits free agency in 2024.
Yeah, it might be. The Rhys thing I agree on. I hadn't thought of the Lorenzen thing the way Tucker did, but it makes a lot of sense. And I compared him a little bit to Eflin in that there's probably more there. I think the Rays noticed there's more there with Eflin. He's been great for them this year. And it's always interesting. Lorenzen has been a reliever and a starter. And sometimes versatility can be looked at two ways. It's like, well, he's not really great at either, but also he could do either. I think that helps the Phillies now. But moving forward, Lorenzen only has like 670 innings in his career he's pitched. So you kind of project forward and say he's probably got some bullets left in there, right? He says pitches left in his arm for the next 3, 4, 5 years. He could be a much cheaper replacement for Aaron Nola as a 4 with some versatility that if their young guys emerge, get McGarry and Painter and Abel, that he becomes a reliever in the second half of that contract. So it could be a tryout for him as well. And my guess is he would get a contract this offseason. I know he was an all-star this year, but similar range to what Eflin got last year, 3 years, $40 million, something like that. And we'll see how it pitches down the stretch. But the Phillies, I thought, they're a better team today than they were yesterday. They have better pitching depth. They have a better bench with Castro over Harrison, who was really not doing nothing this season. But I didn't think they moved the needle enough to rescue an offense that needs rescuing. Great clutch win last night, but it's really hard to win those games like that consistently. We shall see how this plays out. Appreciate everyone watching, listening to WIP Daily. Back tomorrow with more. Thanks for subscribing. And, of course, following the show right here on WIP Daily.